So thank you, Michelle, for joining us. I'm Mitra. For those of you who don't know me, I'm a business manager in GCAS. Michelle is the CEO of Peanut, and she's also the founder. And it's basically a Tinder-style dating app for mums to meet other mothers. The app launched in Feb this year and has had amazing traction. So it's been picked up in the press a lot. So you might have seen her mentioned there. And we wanted to take this opportunity for her to come in, because I know a lot of Googlers sort of talk about starting their own thing or starting something outside of work. And sometimes the inertia of just being in your day job can stop that. So someone who's actually gone from working for other people to working for herself is quite an interesting journey. So Michelle also launched Peanut on Android in October.
Yeah.
Yeah. So finally we can claim fame to it too as well, which is amazing. So I'm going to do a few questions, but really please have like your own questions prepared. So we'll have loads of time at the end for your questions as well. I remember distinctly when you first kind of talk to us about the idea. So I know Michelle outside of this particular thing. We were at a wedding, and she had her phone and a deck on her phone, and it was like, this is my idea for an app and what it was going to be like. And I remember at that point, she was kind of passing the phone around the table, and a lot of people were like, this is amazing. And equally, a lot of people were like, isn't this like Mumsnet? And like really like challenging about the idea.
Yeah.
So can you talk a little bit about where the idea came from?
Yeah.
And then how you kind of got to that first investor meeting and kind of like the challenges and people's reactions to that?
Yeah. So I started life actually as a corporate lawyer, like way back when. That was my kind of starting point. I used to do a lot of M&A. And I went to work in-house for a biotech company, which was, again, very, very different and not very me at all. And one of the lawyers that I used to work for called me and said, you should go and meet this guy. He's a new client of mine. He needs someone to go and work with him. I think you'd be great. I think you'll love it. It's a dating website. I was like, not really. And this was back in 2010, and dating was definitely not what it is now. And there was definitely a feeling of like, dating, not sure. Maybe something your parents did when they got divorced, or just wasn't like it is today. And tech definitely wasn't kind of, in London, it definitely didn't have the same feel and excitement and buzz that it does now. And I went to meet the founder, who was a young guy, who was unusual, and it was interesting. I'd never really understood it as a business, and what I mostly couldn't understand is that there were 56 million people using this product I'd never heard of called Badoo.
Has anyone heard of Badoo?
Yeah. And I met a few more people. It was very exciting. It was in some crazy rundown office in Soho, and I decided I would do it, so I became the lawyer there. I'm very nosy. I asked lots of questions under the guise of being the lawyer, you're allowed, and particularly was fascinated by it was making money. I wanted to understand how people were using the product, what the journey was, why they would pay for certain things. And then I was kind of there for the evolution from web to mobile. So this was all back like web. I think the most adventurous we had was WAP. And it was kind of that transition. And that was exciting, really understanding why people's behavior was different, why people were spending differently, how long they spent on web versus mobile, all of those different kind of vantage points that I'd never really seen of a business before. And it kind of came to the evolution of Tinder. Tinder came out, and I remember my girlfriends in the States talking about it and me being like, what is it? And it was a grey screen, and I was desperate to see and desperate to understand, and that was really the kind of starting point of looking more, less about legal, and more about kind of being involved in the business. I started working alongside Andre as his kind of right hand, and became deputy CEO at Badoo. And as part of that was involved in Bumble, which I'm very proud of and was very exciting. And I suppose it was that whole journey, and that was kind of over the course of 5 years, wrapped up in 30 seconds, that I decided that I really wanted to do something, that a product that I would use. I wasn't dating in my personal life, and I really had this experience when I became a mother, that I didn't really have any girlfriends who had babies, and I really wanted to just take all of the kind of learnings that I had about connectivity and apply it to women. I also was really frustrated by the products that were out there for mothers. Everything changed. You go from using, whether it is Snapchat at the time, which was really, really buzzing, or Insta, or Pinterest, or Deliveroo, or any of these amazing, or Uber, any of these like very slick, cool products, and then you would become a mum, and it was like, well, where's my thing? And everything felt like it was very much aimed at babies and kids, and not aimed at me as a woman. And so I decided I would do it. So I left Badoo in January last year. And it was absolutely terrifying. I loved my job and I loved what I did, and I was very proud of everything that I did with Badoo and with Bumble. And so to make that move was, well, you know, I was very scared.
Yeah.
But I really wanted to do it, and I believed in it. And it wasn't just that I wanted to do a product for me, it's a huge business opportunity. You know, women are making 85% of household decisions on spend, and yet there was just this huge gap, and I really wanted to address it. So I left, did a lot of consulting, saved a lot of money because I knew I'd have to start the build on my own, and went to one of our friends' weddings and was kind of talking through it, and one of our friends in particular, who is now a very avid supporter, was like, I don't get it, I don't think mums really need this. And I was like, how would you know? You're not a mum, but also why? And he was like, yeah, but this is Mumsnet. I was like, absolutely not. This is something very, very different. And I think at that time I had my term sheet. So I just got a term sheet from NEA. And getting the term sheet, it was a real whirlwind, because I don't think I really fully appreciated what that process was. So I'd gone from, probably through naivety, I just was really ballsy and had me and a deck.
Yeah.
And that's
so
it.
That's all you had? Did you commission someone to do some research, or did you do your own research?
Yeah, I had done it.
Okay.
I'd just gone and researched the market, had a look at what had changed, what was the size of the market, what else was out there, like doing those weird competitor analysis, speaking to women, so many women everywhere, on Facebook groups, on, you know, in real life, everywhere, asking them what they did, what was their view. Lots and lots of that kind of qualitative research.
And was one of the overwhelming things that came from that was that there was just nothing on the market that really targeted a woman who was a modern person, basically. It seemed to be like from the 80s or something.
Yeah, I think that the overwhelming response was we were using products, or women were using products that were there because that's all they had. And there wasn't really anything that had kind of innovated forward. And it was that moment for me where I was like, why can't it be me then? Like, why can't I be the one to change it? And that is not to do down any of the products that were out there. You know, Mumsnet, Baby Centre, What to Expect, all of these like amazing platforms did something amazing 15 years ago, which is they gave women a voice who were mothers, and we didn't have it before. So I would never ever knock that. It was just, I was looking at doing something different.
Yeah. So you had this idea, you have this deck.
Yeah.
Where do you go from there? Like, who are you shopping it around to, and how do you get your first investors on board, and what was that process like? Especially since there wasn't anything exactly like what you were describing on the market, and you're going to a lot of investors who I'm assuming don't understand that particular psyche and that particular loneliness that comes from motherhood. So how do you kind of go through that process of convincing them that this is something that there is a market for?
That part is challenging. So in terms of how do you identify, it's very different, or how I did it this time round and how I would do it going forward, and if I were doing it again, is very different to how I did it, you know, completely naively and inexperiencedly, which is I spoke to everyone. If someone said, I'll give you an intro, I was like, great, I'll take the intro. And I was non-discriminatory in who I spoke to. And I suppose the upside of that is I learn a lot. So I learn when things, what conversations not to have, what the difference between a late stage and an early stage fund is, and you know, when someone says to you, we're at the end of our fund, but if you can hold off until we're at the beginning of our next fund, what does that even mean? Like all of those things that just were a complete minefield. And this time I have been much more kind of targeted in, I want to speak to you because I think you understand the market or whatever it might be.
Yeah.
But I spoke to everyone, and that is tough.
Yeah.
I shamelessly asked for intros to people.
Yeah. Well, you have to.
And you have to. And I asked friends and friends of friends, and I met NEA through Whitney at Bumble, and that was the kind of starting point. And from there, anyone I spoke to, I would always say at the end of it, thank you so much for your time. If you can think of anyone else that you think I should be speaking to. And I always ended like that. I don't think that's necessarily the right way, by the way.
Yeah.
Do your own research, and you can be like
more targeted.
More targeted, because it's important for you too. It's like a marriage, right? You're getting into a relationship with this person. Yeah. They're going to be in your business. You know,
so how did you approach things differently with your second round? This is your seed funding round that she just closed. It was on the front page of the Times. I don't know if anyone else saw it.
Thanks.
So yeah, that's fantastic. So congratulations on that. So how did you approach it differently? Did you target funds and say, I'm going to go after you for your, like, because I believe that you'll understand this market a little bit better?
It was obviously easier because before I was pre-product, I was kind of pre-team actually. Greg and I hadn't, at the point that I was starting to speak to investors, Greg and I hadn't decided to work together, who's my co-founder. And so it was very, very early. This time, obviously, our product is out there, we have metrics, we have a team, we can go out, and it was much, you know, it's much easier to speak to people. And I was much more kind of purposeful about who I was speaking to and why. And so we have 2 joint lead investors on this round, and they both bring something different that I'm really excited about. Sweet Capital, who are the founders of King.com, so Candy Crush, which was really exciting for me from a product perspective, and their insight and their understanding of women spending, you know, time on Candy Crush and all of those, you know, that was valuable for me, and I really was excited to have them on board. And the Female Founders Fund in New York, obviously exciting for me to have a kind of female VC with that kind of overview and understanding of the female market. So I was very, very specific about who we spoke to. I'd also kept in contact with people like Greycroft, who I'd met first time when I was doing our pre-seed. And so when I was like, look, we're doing our seed, obviously I'd built a relationship with them over a year. So then it was easy for them to say, yes, you know, we're in. So I think that's how I was different. I was definitely more targeted. I think probably naivety made me a bit fearless first time. But also, you know, you waste a bit of, you do waste a bit of time in that way. And if you're doing it ever, you can be selfish. Your time is precious too. And maybe it's not the right time to take that introduction. If someone says to you, amazing, wait right now, I'm just going to introduce you to, it's okay to say, actually, can I come back to you when I'm ready for that introduction? Because you don't want to waste it. That could be like an amazing intro, but do it at a time that suits you. Yeah.
So you, so if I go back a little bit for when you first launched, so you want to sort of make a big splash. But I assume you don't want a bunch of people kind of downloading this app and no one else is on there. And I was listening to an interview with a Tinder founder, and he was like, he basically like ran from one room to the other in a college campus and was like, women are there. And then he ran to the other room and was like, get on there because men are there. And he had to kind of get those first people online before you could actually get sort of big traction. So how did you get that first kind of critical mass before you can make a big splash in the market? Or is that how you did it, or how did you kind of intro it?
No? The idea was we would launch in London and New York simultaneously, and we would seed it with some women who we knew had existing communities. Very small, it was really proof of concept. Can you go and test it, seed it to women that you know, get their feedback, let's see. So really in that first week, I think we thought we'd be doing really well if we had like 50 people using it and we could kind of see their interaction. And we did do that, and then the next day it went, and the press coverage was insane and very interested, and so that kind of amplified.
Yeah.
But I still kind of was very clear on the fact that if you're building a social product, you have to feel exactly what you said, like there are people around you. You can't open the app and be like, okay, so the nearest woman is in Tennessee.
But you never had that problem.
Yeah, so
amazing.
So we were very focused on it, but we then became very reactive. So we would see women using it in Dallas, or women using it in LA, or women using it in Chicago, and then we would do a small event or a dinner or something to let other women know in that area, you'll have a great user experience if you use Peanut here, because we already have thousands of women using it.
Yeah.
But it was very organic up until that point.
Amazing. So you sort of talked about that you were involved in dating apps, and Michelle actually named Bumble. So you've got a knack for naming things. And we've sort of seen this arc that you also described, that dating was this online dating was very weird to begin with. And now, if you are single and you do want to meet someone, like, it's not a question, you would be on a dating app.
Yeah.
So what is the arc that you're trying to sort of see with Peanut? So my observation, and you can tell me if this is right or wrong, is that loneliness is sort of one of the last taboos that we talk about.
Yeah.
And not just for mums, it's like if you're married or anything, you kind of have to have this bravado about not being lonely.
Yeah.
So where do you sort of see, like, what is your overarching mission, and where do you see kind of Peanut shaping that arc?
I think that you're absolutely right. The evolution from dating, going from something slightly awkward to everyone's doing it, and my friends describing it as Michelle works in dating to Michelle works in dating too. I remember it so clearly, and I think that there is a lot of discussion around, is tech and social media making us more lonely? And for me, it's all about how you use it. If you're using it in a way that helps you have those in real life connections, how could that ever be a bad thing? So we have tools within Peanut that facilitate polling and scheduling times to meet. So it's like having a doodle effectively, but within the messaging, and 3 clicks and it's in your calendar. And for me, that was really important because it's about getting that face to face. But what's more scary, kind of sitting, looking at your phone and kind of watching everyone else's life, or then sending a connection to meet someone in real life? Well, it's more scary just watching the world pass you.
Yeah.
So I think that we will see more. There is a lot more conversation around loneliness, and I know that we have a lot of conversations about, are millennials the loneliest generation ever, and all of those things. And I think that it's about encouraging tech, or using tech to help you meet in real life and to facilitate in real life. And I think that the taboo, the last taboo that we need to break, is actually being able to come out and say, as a 30-something, yeah, I'm lonely, or yeah, this is tough and it's not everything that everyone told me it would be, or yes, sometimes it's 2 a.m. and I feel like the whole world's asleep and I'm awake feeding this baby and no one else understands me, or whatever it might be. And that kind of being able to have that contact with someone and support and network is really important.
Yeah. Do you find that that's sort of your biggest barrier to growth, is that people kind of download the app and then they're nervous about actually contacting other mums? And do you sort of see a massive difference between, like, you've launched in the States, obviously, and how they've adopted the product very differently from here?
Yeah, so I think that there is a difference between the US and the UK behaviour. We're only in the US and the UK. Culturally, I don't know how terribly British it is to speak to people we don't know. I don't think we're madly good at it. Versus in the States, where people are perhaps a little bit more open to giving it a go. And so I do think that we can see a little bit of a difference. Again, it kind of depends on your stage of life as well. If you used a dating app to meet your partner, of course, this doesn't seem like a hurdle. Well, of course, it would be a natural thing that you're going to use an app like this to meet friends. So there are all different, you know, it's very personal in that way. I think that we do see women who use the app and watch. A bit of watching. I'm a lurker too, so I totally get it. Watching before they do it, and then I sometimes get messages from women, what can I say? I don't know what the best message to send is, or whatever it is. And for me, like say anything, say hi, say what are you eating, whatever, it doesn't matter. But that's much less scary. Sending that message is much less scary than spending a week on your own without a grown-up to talk to.
Yeah, absolutely. So I'm going to open it up to the floor in like one question, so keep them ready. Before I do that, so at Google, I mean, we obviously started out with 2 people in a garage, and one of the sort of principles that we try to stay true to at least is being very scrappy, and like that having less will force you to be smarter and do better. So you're obviously small still.
Yeah.
So how are you thinking? You've got ambitious plans for Peanut, but you're still a small team. So how are you prioritizing, and how are you thinking about your next growth stage given that constraint, so that you kind of propel yourself in the best way possible to grow?
I think it's really hard. I do believe that having little makes you scrappy because you have no choice, right? And it's do or die. I have to go out there and I have to establish that the product is firstly viable, and secondly we've got traction, otherwise we have no product. So I do believe in it. We are a team of 6, so we're very small. And every decision I make, I equate to headcount. So if I'm going to spend X on a really nice office, for example, and I'm not currently, I'm squatting. But if I'm going to spend X on office space, well, that's like 2 extra people in the team that could make us go, reach that part of our roadmap 3 months ahead of plans. So I always equate it to headcount and the ability to go faster. I cheekily ask for favours. People have asked me for favours in the past, and I've always helped where I can. So I don't think anyone should be shy to ask for favours. They actually might be really excited to work with you, and what's the worst? They say no. Okay. Yeah. So it's no bother. So I shamelessly ask people, and I think what we now need to do, we're building a new feature at the moment, which is very kind of like head down product focused. And then we really have to go out and amplify it, and that's quite scary because I have to go and let all of our existing users know. Fine, that's not a bother, but now it's really like kind of sharing it more widely, and we have a limited budget, and we have a certain time to establish it in, and we'll have to learn as we go. And probably because we're a team of 6, we can be quite agile and say, okay, that didn't work, scrap, next. We do a bit of test and dump. Test it, didn't work, go next. I think not being precious and not being too tied to your idea of this will work, and being prepared to say, okay, and on with the next, is helpful. But I've made mistakes along the way, of course, we all do, and it's, I mean, in hindsight, at the time, it's the most painful thing in the world. You're like, oh my God, that was £5,000. And then it's 5K that I will never waste again. So
yeah, absolutely. So I'm going to open it to the floor. Anyone with questions?
Okay, sorry. Quick question. 2 quick questions for you. One, co-founders are really important because after your kind of seed funding for all of the rounds, that duo is really important to investors. So how did you pick your co-founder? Yeah. And the second question is, did you find what you were looking for out of Peanut? Yeah.
So Greg is my perfect opposite. He is brilliant. Not that I'm not brilliant, sounds awful. But confidence, Michelle. But he's very focused, and he is a brilliant technician, and he is very logical, and I'm always thinking over here, and he's thinking about kind of how we're going to get there. I found Greg purely by accident. I was speaking to a friend that we had in common and saying that I really needed to hire, but I couldn't hire anyone from Badoo or Bumble. I was under restrictive covenant, and so my usual pool was out of bounds. And she said, oh, you should speak to Greg. He's just left Deliveroo. He'll have an idea of the market. And so I was waiting for the introduction. I got really impatient. It was taking a long time. So I just emailed him and I was like, so I'm waiting for this introduction from our friend. Can I pick your brains about the market and, whatever? And we started speaking, and he was like, actually, I love the idea. I'm going to do it with you. So we kind of fell into it in that way. He has a little girl and had kind of understood the issues surrounding it. And so I was very lucky in that way. And he is definitely, probably the better half of Peanut. And in terms of have I got out of Peanut what I wanted, it is the best feeling in the world when someone messages you to say, I've just met my ex-best friend on Peanut, or I was having a really tough time and I can see light at the end of the tunnel because I've got a drink with a girl I've met on Friday, whatever it might be, because that's what it's for, right? And my favorite thing, it's like a weird, get off a plane wherever I am, open Peanut, see like women around, hi, speak to them, psycho, just to kind of see what they're doing. And it's amazing, I can find out like where they go to eat, or where's like a kid-friendly place, whatever it is. And it's that kind of community and hyper community, it's amazing. So yeah, I'm very proud of it.
My name is Camila. I'm super excited to have you here. So the question is, you're being a lawyer. I'm assuming you did have some exposure to technical terms and stuff in your previous careers, but still, building an app is very technical. So how did you overcome? How deep was your knowledge? Did it have to be, or you probably had your co-founder to help with that? Basically, the fear is, can you actually learn all these things, and do you have to as a founder?
Yeah, and I think most of the people in this building are on the business side. Yeah. And so when we talk to engineers, there is like a little bit of a disconnect. So how do you kind of like the sort of extension of that is how do you like talk, make your preferences known so that they kind of interpret it into what is now really a beautiful app?
I just ask questions all the time, and I don't think I really have a shame about whether it's a stupid question or not, because it would be more stupid if I pretended to know and it turns out wrong, or I haven't been able to express it in the right way. I am very fortunate. Greg is patient, and I do have a brilliant team who I kind of communicate well with. And you're right, I was working in an industry where I have an awareness, but I will ask and I will pick and prod until I understand why we can't do something, or why it's been done in that way. And I just think that you have to be fearless in the questions. Actually, you'll find, in the same way that you feel proud about your work every day, the engineers are so proud of what they do. If you ask, they're delighted to share it with you, right? Like everyone in my team, if I want to know something, they're delighted to tell me why it is. And I suppose if you're so interested and you both care about what you're building, it's natural that you will ask and they will answer, and you'll get to that point. But I don't think you should ever be fearful of what you ask.
I think there's a question here.
Two things. The first one is because in a social network you have that effect that the more people you have, blah, blah, blah. I want to ask you about how you picked up the very initial people to seed it with.
Yep.
Because it influenced the trajectory. The second thing that I wanted to ask is about funding. So where did you go for funding and why? Since you have a UK and a US connection, I think that there are things that fly here and don't fly over there, and vice versa, if you have an opinion about it.
So in terms of getting those initial users and getting those that initial traction, that really comes down to me just speaking to a lot of people and kind of being cheeky enough to say, so I've got this app coming out, can I let you know, like, when it's like, will you test it for me? Will you, and mostly people want to be involved and they want to help you and they want to kind of test something new. So again, shamelessly asking people, will you do that? Will you share it with your friends? Will you tell your friends when it's ready? And using my friends in the States, in New York, to say, okay, can you ask your girlfriends? So it was really that. And I think that the more you talk about something, I've heard people say, weird things, you mustn't tell anyone your idea. Don't tell anyone your idea until it's ready. I just think it's bizarre, because how will you ever know whether your idea is for you or for everyone? Like, you'll never know whether your product has a good fit or not. So Mitch and I bored them at a wedding. I spoke to everyone about it because I wanted to hear more, and I wanted to know what people had to say about it, and I wanted to understand how they would use it and why, so that then when it came to release, they were excited to test it for me. I I had a group of girlfriends who I was testing colours with. Do you like this colour or this colour? Do you like this logo or this logo? Would you press this button or this button? I mean, it was really like that. So I think if you're doing something social, you have to find that pool of people who you want to test it with and test. And in today's kind of environment, you can create that group anywhere. You can create it in a Facebook group or a, you know, on Twitter, gather people, or get some people on an Instagram handle and get them to follow you. And then, you know, there are so many ways that you can test, like get a social group and test it before you have to get to the stage where you're going to build an app or whatever it might be. In terms of funding and getting the right funders, as I mentioned before, I have got the most brilliant funders, and I'm so super proud of all of my funders, and they all bring something different. There's all a different angle. I have some who are US and some who are UK, so I don't have predominantly US or UK. I have a bit of a split. I say UK, I mean Europe, actually. So I have a bit of a split, and I think that when finding funders, it's really about finding the right people who understand your business. And really, this time round, I researched so that I knew exactly what businesses they'd invested in before, whether there were analogies to what I was trying to do or whatever it might be. So, you know, it's pretty de-spiriting when you speak to people and they're like, moms don't need that, they drink coffee all day. Or, better not show my wife that, she spends enough time on her phone, or whatever other nonsense stuff. And I've heard it all. And then you meet someone and they're brilliant and they say, okay, so what's the size of the market? Okay, so why is what you're doing different? Okay, so how are you going to monetize? Okay, so where do you think the barrier to entry is? And all of those smart questions, because they're not seeing it as you as a woman who happens to be a mother and creating a mothering app. They're seeing it as a business and a market potential. And it's finding those gems, and they are there. And I think that at the moment, there's a lot of bad press around the funding and VCs, and that's probably deserved for those who deserve it, but there are some brilliant, brilliant minds out there, and it's just about finding them and being relentless in your search to find the right partner for you.
And you found funding pre-revenue?
Yes.
Okay, thanks.
Pre-product, actually.
Okay.
Yeah.
So what's changed for you now that you run your own business versus being CEO of someone else's business?
It's like, do you ever used to have that dream when you go into school and you're naked and everyone's laughing, you don't know why, and then you look down, you're naked? It's like that dream every day. It was like that at the start. It's very scary, you know, there is strength in numbers, and when, you know, when I was at Badoo, I really felt like I was part of something huge, but a small part of something huge, but there is that safety, and when you're doing it on your own, it's all on you, and it's really scary, and it's personal because, you know, I always cared about my job, and it was a huge part of my identity, but I care so much about Peanut because I don't want to let my team down, my investors down, my users down, like women down, like there's so many huge pressures that I just don't want to let that fall. And so there is a huge burden of responsibility. Similarly, I feel that the highs are extraordinarily high because you know every single ounce of when you moved that, you know, tiny, tiny icon 0.2 millimeters to the left, and you know that there was a real thought process behind it, and you know, all of a sudden your conversion increases and you're like, ah, and no one else knows that, but the high is so high from that that it makes it all worthwhile. But it's extraordinarily hard work, and which it was before, but it's a different kind of work and pressure, I think.
Yeah.
I have a few questions. So one is, how did you get your roadmap, and how, in terms of company growth, what do you see in the future, and how do you kind of realign that when things change? My second question is, I guess having a startup and being so passionate about it, and having a successful career that you've had, how do you you almost become consumed by your idea, because it is, you know, and it's good to be because you're so passionate, but how do you keep yourself sane in terms of working hours? And, you know, there's, how do you do that? I think that's one of my main questions.
Pause, otherwise I'll forget them. What was the first one? Tell me the first one again.
It was
It's around the roadmap.
Oh, the roadmap.
Yeah.
So the roadmap was, I suppose it was like this very kind of broad vision of Peanut has to be like modern motherhood, and that's what we want it to represent. And here are all the facets of modern motherhood that we could cover. Okay, I don't want that. We don't need to be that. Someone else is doing that. And really kind of boiling it down in that way. And then thinking very specifically about where we really felt like the opportunity lay and how we can kind of unpick it and get through there. And I would say that the roadmap is ever evolving, and sometimes we have an idea and we all love it, but we know it's not a priority and it kind of gets shuffled to the back, and it's that sad kind of item in JIRA that will maybe never like come to the forefront. And we hope it will, but probably won't, you know, until we kind of double in size. And sometimes it is imperative that we deal with something because it's impacting on the way users are interacting with the product. So I think it's just being on your toes all the time and not being wedded to it so that you're prepared to change. And we have an idea for, you know, our subsequent feature to the one we have, but it might change. We have to wait and see how users use our next feature first before we can really see, okay, is that going to be the right direction? Or maybe we'll discover something brand new. So I think a lot of it comes from watching like user behavior as well, and your analytics, and really like being so grateful for all the amazing data where you can kind of watch the behaviors. Balance and work-life balance doesn't exist, just in case anyone was interested. It's a lie. I think it's a juggle, right? And some days you're amazing at juggling things, and some days you're terrible at juggling things, and some days you're an amazing partner, and sometimes you're a horrible partner, and sometimes you're an amazing boss, and sometimes you're the worst, and you just have to be a little bit at peace, and you kind of juggle it. But if you're going to do something that you love, you have to be a bit obsessed by it, I think. Literally all of my friends and family are like Peanut obsessed. That's all I can talk about. And I think you have to be like that because it's what makes you get up out of bed at 6 a.m. to, you know, do some work before my little boy gets up to get ready. You know, it's the drive.
I just wondered that, I guess there was a problem that you thought, right, I can fix this. To me, it seems like the big difference in entrepreneurship today compared to, say, like 30 years ago is the need to monetize and where that comes in. So I just wondered when you started thinking about that and what pressure you got from funds about how developed your thinking had to be.
Yep. There is an amazing deck for the LinkedIn Series B raise. I think it's on the Greylock website. Anyway, if you haven't read it, you should go and have a look at it because it's amazing, because it's actually a critique by one of the co-founders of his own deck, as a like looking at it from a VC perspective, having been the entrepreneur. And in that, he kind of identifies 3 lines of possible revenue. And his critique is, you shouldn't be talking about 3 lines of revenue. You should really only be talking about 1. But we didn't really know, and you know, so it's really interesting to see his kind of own critique of his own work, effectively. And it's also, I mean, read it anyway because it's really fascinating to see like what their predicted growth was, where they were, and you forget. I think we forget, like how. Not how slow, but it was an incremental growth. It wasn't all of a sudden just bang LinkedIn, you know, it took time. So obviously I had thoughts and ideas on monetization. I've come from a world where, you know, Badoo monetizes extremely well. And so I had ideas. I think probably my main stress point, and I think it's specific to my market, is everyone assumes I want to do advertising. It's women, their mums, advertising. Is that your model? No, absolutely not. You know, it's that. So for me, it was more about, here are some other possible streams. I don't know which ones are right because I need to see how people are engaging with the product before I can definitively say, but here are some ideas, and no, not all of them revolve around an ad model. But I think having some smart thought around how you could see it progressing, even if it doesn't end up going that way, but to show that you've given it consideration is a good idea. But you know, LinkedIn started with 3 streams on their deck. It was good enough for them.
I think we had time for one more question. Yeah? Okay. Go.
Hi. So by the time you launched, Mush had also just launched. I was wondering how you handled that in your investor presentations and if that was a kind of pushback from potential investors at all.
I think that anyone who is doing something in the same space as you or the same market as you, it is confidence that there is a market. And all it does, you know, there isn't just one dating app. There isn't just one type of cola drink. There is probably just one search engine, but but you know, I think all of those having the ability to have someone else in the market just establishes a proof and a validity in the market, and I think that's important. I think that what will be your differentiator is how you execute, how you see the market evolving, how you see your product evolving, how you see differentiators. And for me, there are just lots of different ways to solve the same problem. And it's all about how you're answering that problem and why you're the right person to solve the problem that in the way that you see it. Because everyone will take a different approach. So in terms of how I responded to it, didn't really.
Fair enough.
I was very single-minded in what we were doing.
Yeah, absolutely. I think we've run out of time. So I'm going to thank Michelle for joining us. It was amazing. Thank you so much for coming in. And let's give her a round of applause.